In this lecture, we're going to look at the functional organization of the nervous system. The components of the nervous system is going to be made up of the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, and sensory receptors. And it's going to be responsible for sensory perceptions, mental activities, stimulating muscle movements, and secretion of many glands. Now, the nervous system is divided up into two subdivisions. We have the central nervous system, or the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. And what makes up the central nervous system is going to be basically the brain and the spinal cord. And the brain, of course, is located in the cranial vault of the skull, and the spinal cord is going to be located in the vertebral canal. And so here's the brain, and here's the spinal cord. And everything that comes off of the brain and the spinal cord is going to be considered peripheral nervous system. So once again, central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, everything else like these cranial nerves and these peripheral nerves are going to be peripheral nervous system. And of course, I can't help but think that this thing looks like we just filleted a fish. But anyway, the brain and the spinal cord are continuous with each other at the foramen magnum. Now, when talking about the peripheral nervous system, there's going to be two subcategories. There is sensory or afferent and motor or efferent. Now, how are you going to remember that? Afferent and efferent sound so much alike. In fact, they sound the same. So this is what I want you to remember. Same. S-A-M-E. Sensory is afferent. Motor is efferent. Also, I want you to think about this. Tracts going through the spinal cord are going to be either ascending tracts, which means they're going up toward the brain, or they're going to be descending tracts, which means they're going to be coming away from the brain. And so think about this. Sensory afferent. Sensations are going to go from the periphery up to the brain, where it's going to be interpreted. Let's suppose you touch something hot. Okay? That information is going to ascend or go up toward the brain. So that's sensory afferent going through ascending tracts. Now, if it's hot, you're going to want to pull it away. So your brain decides, okay, that's getting a little warm. We should probably pull our finger away. So it's going to send information down descending tracts to our muscles. And so that is going to be the motor or efferent tracts. Again, that's going to be descending away from the brain to the periphery. So sensory afferent are ascending, motor efferents are descending. Okay, so I hope that helped. Now, the divisions of the peripheral nervous system are going to be the somatic nervous system. Soma means body. And the autonomic nervous system. Now, the somatic nervous system, we typically have conscious control over it. We can control our muscles. So our body is made up of muscles, correct? And the autonomic nervous system, well, autonomic sounds like what? Automatic. That we don't have conscious control over. Now, the autonomic nervous system, or ANS as we call it, is going to be made up of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Now, this slide also mentions the enteric nervous system. Enteric refers to the gut. Your gut has this huge nervous system that goes along with it. Typically, though, we usually hear about sympathetic and parasympathetic. I don't really like to lump enteric nervous system in here because the enteric nervous system responds to sympathetic and parasympathetic actions. Sympathetic is going to be your fight or flight, in which case the enteric nervous system is going to be inhibited. So you're going to have less digestive action going on, whereas the parasympathetic is called your rest and digest. So you're going to have more of a positive effect on the gut when the parasympathetic nervous system is employed. Now, here's a little video just to kind of help you tell the two apart. Now let's suppose you're out taking a little walk, and I don't know, maybe you're doing a little bird watching, and you happen upon a bear. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, nice bear, nice bear. Okay, here. Yeah. Oh no. Okay, now aren't you a little sympathetic to this poor guy who's probably going to be eaten by a bear? Okay, so this is what I want you to think of. This is the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, you're sympathetic to, okay, that's me, about to be eaten by a bear. And so think sympathetic nervous system. What is going to happen to your heart rate? Okay, if a bear is about to eat you, your heart rate is going to increase. So a sympathetic response would be an increase in heart rate. What do you think is going to happen to your blood pressure? It's probably going to increase, right? How about your pupils? Your pupils are going to dilate. Okay, so pupils will dilate. And how about airways? Are they going to constrict or are they going to dilate? A lot of people think they're going to constrict, but they're not. They're going to dilate to let more oxygen in to your lungs, because the sympathetic nervous system is also known as the fight or flight mechanism. And if you're going to fight, or if you're going to try to run out of there, well, first of all, good luck with a bear. But anyway, you're going to need more oxygen getting to those muscles. How about the digestive tract? Is it going to speed up or slow down? It's actually going to slow down. Okay, you might have to change your shorts after this, but the rest of the digestive tract, that takes a lot of energy to digest food, and it's going to take a lot of blood going to the area to absorb those nutrients. So that the digestive system is going to slow down, and the blood is going to be shunted more to the muscles. Okay? And the reason this is important is because a lot of you going into healthcare are going to deal with medications that are sympathomimetic. In other words, it mimics the sympathetic nervous system. Like, for instance, some of the bronchodilators used to open up airways. Those are sympathomimetic medications. The side effects are going to be what? Think about sympathetic nervous system again. What's going to happen to heart rate? It's going to increase. It's going to happen to blood pressure. It can increase. So if a patient already has high blood pressure, you want to weigh risk versus benefits. You know, if that person's blood pressure is like really high at that moment, and maybe they're a little wheezy, but they're not in distress, then maybe you don't want to give that sympathomimetic drug, because if their blood pressure spikes too much, you might stroke that patient out. Another thing is, let's see, pupils are going to dilate, which means they might have some photosensitivity. Let's see, what else? Airways. The airways are going to dilate. That's the effect that we're looking for. The other things are side effects. So let's move on. And this is the parasympathetic nervous system. We call this the rest and digest. It's going to have the opposite effects. So parasympathetic is going to cause a decrease in heart rate. It's going to cause a decrease in blood pressure. Pupils are going to constrict. Airways should be constricted to normal. And the digestive tract is going to be more active. I hope this helps. And so I hope you students just appreciate the fact that I put myself in danger just to help you to learn these principles. Anyway, so this is a little graphic of what we already kind of looked at, but we have the stimulus or input, and then we're going to have the response. So the stimulus or input, we have the peripheral nervous system, the sensory receptors, nerves, ganglia, and plexuses. You'll learn what these are a little bit later. We have the sensory division conducts action potentials from the periphery. So what does that mean? Maybe you're just kind of hanging out like I was doing, bird watching, and maybe you heard something, crunching or something like that as the bear was walking up to you. Or maybe you could smell that bear. Or when you turned around and looked, you saw the bear. All of that is coming from the sensory division. So then the central nervous, brain, and spinal cord, it's going to process that information and it's going to initiate a response. And that response can be sent to the motor division, which conducts action potentials to the periphery. We have the somatic nervous system, which will affect the skeletal muscles, and the response in this case is to run away. The autonomic nervous system, its response is going to be on the cardiac muscle. Again, this is where the heart rate's going to increase. Smooth muscle, for instance, the smooth muscle in your blood vessels is going to cause that to constrict and cause your blood pressure to go up. And glands, well, I'd be sweating like crazy. So you can see how all of that is integrated to basically get away from that bear. Cells of the nervous system. This is a nerve cell or neuron. Don't call it a nerve. There's a difference. A nerve is actually a collection of these axons. So you want to refer to this as a neuron or a nerve cell. And it's going to receive stimuli and transmit action potentials. And it's going to do that one direction. Basically, we're going to have those action potentials coming in from the dendrites through the cell body or soma, and then down through the axon. And then from the axon, it's going to go to the terminals or nerve endings. So the dendrites are for your input. The axons are going to be your output. Let's look at some other structures here. Again, we've got the soma or body. The dendrites. Dendrite means tree-like formation. These look like kind of like bonsai trees, don't they? Here's the axon hillock, which is almost funnel-shaped. Here again we have the axon. The axons might be myelinated or unmyelinated. In this case, this is myelinated with a Schwann cell. And that Schwann cell forms the myelin sheath. We have these things called Nissl bodies. Nissl bodies are actually the ribosomes. We have a nucleus. Inside the nucleus, we have a nucleolus. We're going to have a Golgi apparatus or Golgi body, and of course we're going to have mitochondria. Now we have these other cells called neuroglia or glial cells. And glia actually means glue. Okay? And to the early anatomist, it looked like these tiny little cells were kind of gluing or cementing in the larger neurons to hold them in place. Now they're considered support cells. They also help to protect the neurons. And they really didn't think that they had much use as far as cognition goes. Those thoughts are kind of changing now, and they're starting to realize that these neuroglial cells not only have a support and protective function, but they also play a pretty important role in cognition, in thought and intelligence, etc. Now, the types of neurons, we have functional classification. So again, we have our sensory or afferent neurons. And again, the action potentials are going to go toward the central nervous system. We have the motor or efferent neurons, where the action potentials go away from the central nervous system. And then in between, we have what are called interneurons or association neurons. They're within the central nervous system from one neuron to another. We're going to see that later on when we talk about reflexes, where we'll have information coming in, basically sensory information coming in through afferent axons, getting to the spinal cord, making a U-turn through these interneurons, and going right back down through these motor or efferent neurons to cause a reflex to take place. And structural classification, so we're going to have multipolar neurons, and so this is going to be a multipolar neuron. We have bipolar neurons. This is a bipolar neuron where you have a cell body in the center and the dendrite on one end, axon on the other end. And then the unipolar is this type with the cell body kind of hanging off of a stalk. And then here's your axon. So once again, multipolar, bipolar, unipolar. Here's some examples of neuroglia in the central nervous system. We have astrocytes, and they're going to help regulate extracellular brain fluid composition. They also promote tight junctions to form the blood-brain barrier. So you can see that each astrocyte kind of wraps itself around the capillaries. And so anything basically coming out of the bloodstream is going to have to go through these astrocytes first. And that's one way that they give protection and create, again, that blood-brain barrier that's going to help protect the brain. Then over here we have what are called ependymal cells. And these ependymal cells line the brain ventricles. Your brain is not solid. It has these empty spaces called ventricles, which are filled with a fluid, cerebrospinal fluid. And so these ependymal cells, they line the brain ventricles and the spinal cord, central canal. And the spinal cord is also not totally solid. It has a canal going down through the center of it, and it helps to form the choroid plexus. Again, this secretes cerebrospinal fluid. The next of the neuroglial cells is going to be the microglia. Microglia is a specialized macrophage. So basically its job is housekeeping and cleaning up if cells die or bacteria invades the area. And then next is oligodendrocytes. They form the myelin sheath if they surround the axons. Now this is within, again, the central nervous system. Oligodendrocytes form the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. In the peripheral nervous system, we're going to use Schwann cells. They're also called neurolemocytes. They wrap around portions of one axon to form the myelin sheath, kind of jelly roll style. That's a little bit different than the oligodendrocyte, where we have one cell myelinating multiple axons. Here you just have one Schwann cell wrapping around just a segment or a portion of the axon, then a totally different Schwann cell wrapping around, and so on. And then we have these satellite cells. They surround neuron cell bodies in the ganglia, and they provide support and nutrients. Now, looking at a myelinated axon, the myelin protects and insulates axons from one another, and they're not continuous. We have these little gaps that are called the nodes of Ranvier. Unmyelinated axons are encased by Schwann cell cytoplasm. There's no wrapped coating of the myelin surrounding the axons, like you see up here in the myelinated axon. And later on, we're going to see the significance of the myelin sheath as far as action potential propagation goes.